Have you ever noticed how certain people only remember your name when they are in trouble? Maybe you have rearranged your schedule, skipped meals, ignored your own exhaustion just to show up for someone who disappears the moment their problem is solved. It starts small, a quick favor, a short call, a little sacrifice. But over time, those small sacrifices pile up until you barely recognize your own life. You tell yourself that being helpful makes you valuable. You convince yourself that one day all the effort will circle back. Yet deep down there is a quiet question you try to ignore. If you stopped giving so much, would anyone still stay? If that question stings a little, then this story will feel familiar, because sometimes the hardest lessons do not come from enemies. They come from the people we care about the most, and from the version of ourselves that is afraid to disappoint them. In a quiet farming village surrounded by wide golden plains and dusty roads lined with acacia trees, there lived a man named Samuel. Everyone knew Samuel. If a cart wheel snapped on the main road, someone ran to fetch him. If an elderly neighbor needed firewood carried inside, they called for Samuel. If a couple argued and needed a calm voice to settle things, they invited Samuel over for tea. He had a gentle face and a steady tone that made people feel safe. He never hesitated. No matter how tired he was, he would wipe his hands on his trousers and say he was on his way. The villagers often praised him in public gatherings, calling him dependable and kind. Those words warmed him. He wore them like medals, not realizing that each compliment quietly tightened the rope around his own time and energy. While Samuel was busy repairing roofs and fixing gates across the village, his own home slowly began to fall apart. The paint on his walls peeled under the sun. The small vegetable patch behind his house dried up from neglect. A loose step at his front door wobbled every time he climbed it, yet he kept postponing the repair. There was always someone else in greater need, or so he believed. By the time he returned home each evening, his shoulders ached and his eyes burned with fatigue. His younger sister, Miriam, would watch him from the kitchen doorway and ask why he never rested. Samuel would shrug and say that service to others was its own reward. He truly believed that loyalty would be remembered when he needed it most. He did not see that he was slowly teaching everyone that his needs could always wait. One year, during the peak of the dry season, dark clouds gathered earlier than expected. A fierce storm was forecast to sweep across the plains before sunset. The entire village buzzed with urgency. Families rushed to tie down their livestock and secure their grain sacks. Instead of securing his own loose roof panels, Samuel hurried to help his friend Isaac, whose workshop tools were scattered outside. They worked quickly, stacking crates and dragging heavy equipment under shelter. By the time the wind began to howl, Samuel's shirt was soaked with sweat and dust. Only then did he remember his own house. He ran back through the rising wind, but it was too late. Rain slammed against his roof, and the unsecured panels tore away. Water poured inside, soaking his bedding and flooding the cracked wooden floor. When the storm finally passed, the village emerged to inspect the damage. Samuel stood in the doorway of his drenched home, staring at the chaos. Broken boards floated in muddy water. His few treasured books were ruined beyond saving. No one came to check on him. The same neighbors he had assisted for years were busy salvaging their own property. He could not blame them, yet the silence around his house felt heavy. Miriam placed a blanket around his shoulders and said softly that he had protected everyone else but himself. Samuel sat in that silence long after night fell. Something inside him shifted. It was not anger, it was clarity. He realized that kindness had become an automatic response, not a thoughtful choice. A few days later, Samuel walked beyond the fields to visit an elderly woman named Esther who lived alone near the river bend. She had once been the head mistress of the village school and was known for her sharp insight. Samuel told her he felt drained, confused, and strangely invisible. He said he gave everything he had, yet felt emptier each month. Esther listened without interrupting. When he finished, she pointed to the river flowing beside her cottage. She explained that the river nourished crops and sustained wildlife, but it also respected its banks. When heavy rain forced it beyond its limits, it destroyed the very land it meant to feed. Generosity, she told him, must have boundaries. Without them, it turns destructive, even if the intention is pure. Esther challenged Samuel to try something unfamiliar for the next 10 days. Whenever someone asked for help, he was to pause before answering. Not decline everything, but consider whether the request would cost him something essential. Would it steal time needed to repair his home? Would it drain energy he had not yet restored? If the answer was yes, he was to respond honestly and suggest another time. Samuel felt uneasy at the thought. He feared disappointing people and losing the praise that had shaped his identity. Still, the memory of his flooded house strengthened his resolve. The next morning, when Isaac came requesting assistance with reorganizing his storage shed, Samuel hesitated. He explained that he needed to rebuild his own roof first. Isaac looked surprised but eventually nodded and left. The first refusal left Samuel with a knot of guilt in his stomach. He almost ran after Isaac to change his mind. Instead, he climbed onto his roof with fresh timber and began working. It took the entire day to secure new panels and seal the gaps properly. By sunset, his house stood stronger than before the storm. As he climbed down, tired but satisfied, he felt a sense of ownership he had not experienced in years. The sky glowed orange over the plains, and for once he was not rushing elsewhere. That evening, he shared a quiet meal with Miriam without glancing anxiously toward the road, waiting for another call. The guilt slowly faded, replaced by calm. Over the following week, several neighbors approached him for minor favors, carrying water jars, fixing a loose hinge, mediating a small dispute. Samuel listened respectfully but chose carefully which tasks to accept. Some he agreed to later in the week. Others he declined altogether, explaining he had commitments of his own. A few villagers whispered that he had changed, yet something unexpected happened. Those same neighbors began solving simple issues themselves. The man who once relied on Samuel to mend every tool learned to handle basic repairs. The couple who constantly sought his mediation started communicating directly. Instead of collapsing without his constant presence, the village adapted. Samuel noticed that his own garden began to thrive again as he invested regular time in watering and tending it. Months passed and Samuel's home transformed. The walls were repainted in warm earth tones. The vegetable patch produced enough harvest to share occasionally, but this time on his terms. He began waking earlier to read and reflect before the day's demands arrived. When requests came, he no longer reacted out of habit. He responded with intention. Interestingly, respect for him grew stronger than before. People no longer treated him as a permanent solution to every inconvenience. They saw him as a capable man with his own priorities. Even Isaac, who once looked shocked at a refusal, began consulting Samuel as an equal rather than leaning on him as a crutch. One afternoon, Esther visited Samuel's renewed home. She observed the sturdy roof, the vibrant crops, and the relaxed expression on his face. She asked whether everything had fallen apart after he stopped saying yes to every request. Samuel smiled and admitted that the opposite had occurred. By protecting his time and energy, he had strengthened both himself and his relationships. He explained that he now helped from a place of choice rather than obligation. Esther nodded, reminding him that self-respect invites respect from others. When you treat your own needs as important, the world gradually follows your example. So consider your own life for a moment. Are you always available even when you are exhausted? Do you equate constant sacrifice with love or worth? There is honor in generosity, but there is wisdom in balance. Saying no does not erase your kindness, it protects it. It ensures that when you give, you do so wholeheartedly rather than resentfully. Your hours, your energy, and your peace are not endless resources. They require care, just like Samuel's roof and garden required attention. When you begin to guard them thoughtfully, you may discover that the world does not collapse without your constant rescue. Instead, you might finally build a life that feels like your own.